In 1763, Great Britain won the 7 Years' War. They secured global dominance and vast new territories. But the victory came at a staggering cost. The empire was functionally broke. This chart shows the British national debt before and after the conflict. You can see a massive vertical spike right here, pushing the total debt to a staggering £60 million. The empire was drowning in red ink. Across the Atlantic, the American colonies were experiencing a completely different reality. Thanks to a loose governing approach known as salutary neglect, the colonists had spent decades managing their own affairs and quietly building their wealth through smuggling. Looking at these prosperous, lightly taxed subjects, King George III and Parliament saw a clear solution to their budget crisis. They decided the colonies should foot the bill for the war that protected them. Britain was tightening its grip at the exact moment the colonists had outgrown their status as mere tenants of the crown. This tension transformed a budget crisis into a struggle for sovereignty. In 1765, Parliament passed the Stamp Act. It levied a direct tax on printed materials in the colonies, including legal documents, newspapers, and even playing cards. Legal historians have noted that this operated as a sin tax on the colonial justice system. It penalized land speculation and litigation by making the paperwork expensive to file. The handwritten ink at the bottom of this ledger, dated May 18, 1765, shows the commissioners officially putting the machinery of the tax into motion. The colonists rejected the tax entirely. They argued that because they had no elected representatives in London, Parliament levying any direct tax was illegal under the British Constitution. By targeting legal documents and newspapers, Parliament placed a financial burden on the colony's most influential lawyers and printers, the same people positioned to organize a resistance. A clandestine network known as the Sons of Liberty began organizing that resistance. They enforced economic boycotts on British goods and frequently resorted to physical intimidation. Royal tax officials who refused to resign were subjected to mob violence. Some, like the customs officer John Malcolm, were stripped, covered in boiling hot pine tar, and coated in feathers. The resistance escalated in late 1773 when Bostonians dumped nearly 10,000 pounds worth of British tea into the harbor. Parliament retaliated by dissolving the local government and sending 3,000 troops to occupy the city. In April 1775, British troops marched out to Concord to seize rebel ammunition. On the village green in Lexington, the professional British regulars formed lines against a disorganized group of local militia, and someone fired a shot. Although the shooting started in 1775, the colonists already knew their leverage. When protests forced Parliament to repeal the Stamp Act back in 1766, it proved that unified resistance could bend the will of the king. The legal friction over tax stamps and tea duties had crossed a threshold. Local farmers were now mobilized for a shooting war, forced to hold their own against the most professional military in the world. Early engagements, especially the defense of New York, proved that the amateur American forces stood little chance of defeating the British in a traditional head-to-head battle. General George Washington realized he didn't need to win set-piece battles. He adopted a war of posts strategy, recognizing that his Continental Army was the physical embodiment of the Revolution. As long as the army survived, the British could not claim victory. This map illustrates the logic. The British could capture and hold major cities, represented by these isolated circles, but the vast countryside remained impossible to fully occupy. By avoiding major conflicts and dragging out the timeline, Washington made the campaign excruciatingly expensive for Great Britain. While the army stalled the British, public sentiment crystallized. Mass circulation pamphlets argued for total separation from Great Britain, and those arguments spread rapidly from town to town. In the South, Major General Nathaniel Greene perfected this war of attrition. He lost nearly every major tactical battle he fought, but he continuously forced the British forces under Lord Cornwallis to chase him, exhausting their supply lines in the process. The final checkmate arrived in 1781 at Yorktown, Virginia. Cornwallis retreated to the coast to resupply, but a French naval fleet severed his escape route, forcing the surrender of his entire army. The United States secured its independence because it made the cost of empire higher than the value of the tax. They fought a war of endurance, essentially annoying Great Britain into giving up.